Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode one, Rocky Top Real Estate Report. New content, guys, we're bringing to you. I'm Chris Burleson, Knoxville Mortgage Brokers, with my co-host, Bo Kregner, Realty Executives. Bo, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. How about you, Chris?
Doing good, man. Blessed. I know we've talked about this for a long time. Finally had to share it on social media because they say if you share it, it has to happen.
That's it.
So that's why I did that. So it made us pull the trigger, clear our schedules, and make the first thing happen. So we've talked about this for a long time, but a little bit about what we're going to be doing is talking about the local sports scene. So not all real estate; it'll be mostly real estate, but a little bit what's happening locally, any big events. What's going on in the world of sports, because we're both big sports fans. You're of a wrong color than I am. I like the orange. You like the crimson. I hate to say that, so we don't. I did notice when I named the show Rocky Top Real Estate Report, it kind of has RTR in there, which I'll
Yeah.
let you say. Tell everybody what RTR stands
Well,
for in your world.
we don't have to. Everybody knows what it stands
We don't
for.
want to lose our viewers before we even have any.
Well,
Um,
just know that I'm for Tennessee all the other time. My
I
wife
got you.
my wife is a Vol, so
Okay,
I don't have a problem with them.
I got you. Well, let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about the Tennessee is now an everything school. Is what they're saying. Ladies softball, girls basketball's fell off a little bit. College baseball, a lot of momentum in college baseball. Tennessee, we're getting better. We're finally hanging on to a coach here with Josh Heupel, a great recruiter, great offensive mind, I think, in college football. We've seen the dynamic change with Tennessee and even with your beloved Elephants down there in Alabama. Uh, we figured out the SEC. You got to score points. It was we used to have these 9-6 games, 6-3 games, 12-4
The good
weird
old days.
scores like baseball, and I think even legendary Nick Saban figured out, hey, we've got to be able to score some points.
Yep.
So I
I
think
mean,
Tennessee football and Josh Heupel being a Heisman Trophy winner, former quarterback at Oklahoma. Speaking of which, Oklahoma and Texas come in the SEC this coming season, so that makes the SEC even a little stronger.
but
Figured out.
I think it's good for Tennessee because I don't think Heupel would ever get antsy and move over to Oklahoma with them in the same conference.
Right.
If they'd have stayed in the Big 12, and they
Maybe.
fire
Yeah.
Venables or something, then but
Yeah. We've had that happen before with another guy. The Lane Train came through here for a brief stint and took his dream job, and we see how that turned out. But another
yeah,
Saban, uh, I don't want to say degenerate. That's unfair, but another Saban disciple, I guess, came through with Lane. And Saban's put some good coaches out there, so let's don't take that away. But yeah, with Oklahoma now being part of the SEC, I think does solidify with Josh Heupel staying here, because I think if he did go anywhere, it would be back to his home team. But I think he's really enjoying Vols, obviously. And as you know, you've been in Knoxville. If you're having success with your sports program, you'll get all the support you need. There's nothing like the Big Orange going crazy on a Saturday in Neyland. But when things are bad, you'll hear about
well,
it as well. It's probably like that in
I
other
think that's
sports.
with anybody. Everybody forgets what we went through with
The
DeBose and
Mikes,
Franchonis
yeah,
and Shulas and
Smith,
they, they all forget that, and our own fans forget that, and it
right,
really irritates me
yeah,
because we've had it really, really good, and I think DeBoer's going to do fine, but he's
yeah,
not going to do what Saban's done. I don't see anybody doing that, so just need to
right.
realize it and move along. So
Well, even with Tennessee, sometimes you get what you wish for. I mean, Philip Fulmer, I think, was a great coach. He's a great
yeah,
servant of our community. I think he's an upstanding citizen. I got a lot of respect for Coach Fulmer. But people were complaining about 9 and 10 win seasons. I mean, that just wasn't good enough for the fan base. I mean, he had a
right,
winning program. I think at one time I had one of the highest winning percentages of active coaches in college football.
yep,
It just wasn't good enough, and so they ran Phil out of town, and see where that got us. So about
Yeah.
6 coaches later, I think we're on the right track. So
And I think he'll be here a long
me.
time. I really do. I think
Yeah.
he's happy. I think that they're allowing him to run the program. He doesn't have anybody browbeating him and that kind of stuff. And I really think he'll be here for the long haul.
Yeah, excuse me, I go off mute there. Drink
That's
went
all
done
right.
wrong, but yeah, I do too. So let's jump into a little college baseball. As we know, the road to Omaha starts today. The regional tournaments start. There is an unprecedented 11 SEC teams that made the final field. Is it 64 teams, right? 64
Yep.
make
64.
it to the region. So so each host side, I guess, has 4 teams, and it's a double elimination tournament from there.
Yep.
But Tennessee is hosting Northern Kentucky Norse tonight. Okay, so and then we got Indiana and Southern Miss. Southern Miss is the other team in our conference or in our region for double elimination play. So we play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As long as we win all 3, we'll win our region. And then on to the super regionals next week, which is Tennessee. RPI is number 1, so number 1 seed overall. So we should host obviously throughout.
Yeah.
But super regionals next weekend. But obviously one game at a time, as we've seen in college baseball. And Bo, you've been around it. Baseball is a little funny. You got a good pitcher that's having a day, and hitters that just struggle at the plate, or some errors go your way, some bad breaks, some bad calls. You can't just chalk this up as, hey, we're playing next weekend. You got to win one game at a time.
Well, yeah, and a pitcher has a bad day.
Yeah.
Your best guy's on the hill, and all of a sudden he can't find it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few times that it happens, but it happens, and it's usually in a big way. When it does happen.
Yeah, exactly. So good luck to the Vols tonight as they take the field at Step on the Diamond at 7 p.m. on SEC Network against Northern Kentucky. So good luck to the Vols. Tony Vitello and the boys will be ready for action, I'm sure, and on the road to Omaha. So Bo, let's jump into a little bit of the real estate side of kind of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Big topic, as we know. If you're in real estate, I know you've heard this, unless you're living under a rock. I'm sure you've heard about the buyer's agent compensation. Now, it's funny because is that July 1st rollout, right, or something?
Actually,
on it.
They've moved it to August 17th, I think it is now, because the DOJ is not sure that they've done enough, and
enough time.
Right. Well, the thing about it is most people don't understand that a seller never paid a buyer's agent's commission anyway.
Mm-hmm.
He paid the listing agent who shared it cooperatively with, the buyer's agent.
Right.
And without a buyer, you're not selling a house anyway. So to make a long story short,
so theoretically, even though it comes from seller's proceed, yeah.
Yeah, well, what I was saying is they never had to, they still don't have to, but if you don't, you put yourself at a disadvantage because most buyers can't pay down payment, closing costs, all those different things, and pay their real estate agent. So you're gonna cut your ability to show your house by not being cooperative. So
I would agree, because you got to have buyers to make anything happen. I'm going to share a little story with you. I kind of want your feedback on this, but this was a good friend of mine, Steve, down in Florida. He owns a real estate company, a title company, and a mortgage company. Okay, Steve's very well versed in all things real estate. He had a closing yesterday where he was actually the lender on the deal. Neither agent worked for his agency. This is where the education key comes into play. There was never a buyer's agent. What do you call it, Bo? A buyer's agent compensation agreement.
agreement. Yeah. Well, you
Yep. So
got
there
to,
was that was
yeah,
never in place. So they got all the way to closing with this deal. There was never and it was in the MLS. Seller will not pay buyer's agent commission. Okay, was
yeah,
never negotiated. Agent was just uneducated or misinformed or just didn't know is where the education comes in.
right.
Got all the way to closing, and all of a sudden the agents were, looking over the closing disclosure, noticed there's no commission for her on the closing disclosure. So they tried to submit an addendum, have the seller sign 3%. Seller says, "Nope, I'm not signing. I'm not paying you. These are my proceeds. I'm not paying a buyer's agent." We specifically spelled that out. Steve, the lender, he could not add that to the CD because it was not part of the
No,
contract. So that couldn't be added.
right.
So the agent went all the way through with this closing, sat at the table with her buyer, and was never compensated due to lack of education. That comes from yourself, as an educator and a team leader. The education part is important out there, and that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, she didn't do her job when they sent out the CD. She had the opportunity to read down it and raise her hand and say, "Hold on."
Right.
But at the same time, with it really needs to be negotiated up front. So she could have still ran into the same thing,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, I don't know the whole backstory. I don't know if her broker kind of just let her walk into dead waters, on her own. But where's her team leader? Where's that education? Should somebody had have informed her that this needed to be in place, or she wasn't getting paid. So I don't know. It's just one of the many stories I'm sure we're going to hear.
yeah,
As these changes take place. I know the mortgage industry. The only thing constant in our business is change. When we went from the HUD 1 to the closing disclosures and the 3-day rescission and appraisal and all these changes that we had to go through to protect the consumer, it really kind of hurt the consumer in the end because sometimes we're ready to close, but we're waiting on these waiting periods and everybody's just waiting. There's nothing that could be done. So sometimes they have unintended consequences that the consumers have to deal with, but it's it's the things we're going to have to adjust to. I think going forward.
well, yeah, and the thing about it is, I'd love to ask that seller that refused that,
Right.
are you going to buy a house after this, and are you going to pay your buyer's agent, or are you going to allow the seller to do the cooperative compensation?
Right.
Are you going to? Because most of them take advantage when they're the buyer, but now they
Sure.
have
Yeah.
questions as a seller.
And let's be honest. I mean, most buyers. That's the thing where I want to come in as a lender. They don't have the 2 or 3% or whatever's negotiated into because it all is negotiable, correct? So all that's
Oh,
negotiable.
everything's negotiable. Yeah.
They don't have the extra money, and especially in this environment that we're in now, to have their down payment, to have the closing cost, to compete with other offers on a house. If they're at a financial disadvantage, they're not going to have the money to pay their agent. So that is key to get negotiated up front and be sure that everybody's on the same page going forward before that offer is made. Is that correct?
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
thing about it is when you go over that with them, a lot of them are going to say, well, then if the seller's not willing to share, then we don't want to look at that house. And that's going to put a disadvantage to the seller because he's going to have fewer people looking at his house for that purpose.
Right. Yeah. And if you don't have these agreements in place, so let's say this buyer just sees it on the internet and they call that listing agent directly, that buyer's agent's, I mean, out of luck, right? If there's no agreement in place. I mean, if they
Exactly.
really work with the, because sometimes they'll say, well, I'll just call the agent directly. Well, then you're not represented
Right.
at that point because they're representing the seller to get the most money possible, for that listing. So when they say we'll work both sides, it gets really tricky because truly, I mean, it does happen, but are they truly working for both sides? I mean, so sometimes you got to pick a side, so you need that representation.
Here in our team and our group, we don't work both sides of the deal simply because if you hired me to sell your house and then somebody wants me to work their side, how am I supposed to work both? You can't.
Right.
I don't care what anybody says. you can step out and be a fiduciary, but then you're not representing either one.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we don't do that. We will hand it off to someone. We just won't work both sides.
Right. I understand. Yeah, that makes total sense. Total sense. Well, Bo, we're 15 minutes into our episode 1. Told you time would fly once we start talking. That you and I having conversations like we do on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis, do different things. So this is nothing new. Just recording it, letting other people hear our conversations. This was kind of what I was doing when I was having, I'd meet with agents for breakfast or whatever, or meet with a financial planner. I would meet with them, whatever we talked about. I'd come to a Facebook Live and talk about whatever we talked about at breakfast, because that's obviously on a lot of people's minds. So 15
Right.
minutes into episode 1. So I'm going to jump in. Is there anything else you want to add on that buyer's agent compensation? Any
No.
final thoughts on that?
Well, there'll be more stipulations come
Sure.
out, and so really there's not a whole lot to talk about until we know exactly what we're going to be looking at.
Exactly. So we'll hit this topic again, but just be sure that education is key. That you're talking with your agents, and be sure you're working with an experienced agent like Bo that kind of knows what's going on, and you don't get led to the slaughterhouse out in this real estate market. So
just make sure you're working with a professional. That's the
that's
thing.
it. That's it. All right, so we're going to go talk now about, because Bo, another thing we talk about, you've got some listings out there now. Things are setting maybe a little bit longer than they were. People are a little more gun shy on pulling the trigger. It's not the multiple offers and 50,000 over ask, sight unseen, and no inspections, no appraisals. You got to get a little creative today, Bo. So what are you seeing? What are you seeing on some of these listings, especially if they're a higher price point? So let's say we'll call it over 500,000 now. That's kind of a step up buyer. What do you see? But typically those buyers have something to sell that they need to get into that price home. What are you seeing? What are you seeing out there in the market on your listings?
Well, right now, I mean, you want to price it right, but even pricing it right, there are times that when you see the CMA come up, you put it out there at the right price, and it's still very slow showings. And a lot of it has to do with the mortgage rate, as you and I talked about. But and the first thing everybody wants to do is lower the price. That's not really as you know, and I'll let you explain it, because as you explained it to me the best, it's not always the best to lower the price. You need to look at maybe buying, paying a buy down towards the mortgage for the buyers.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think that's a great advantage for a buyer right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me know. Can you see my screen there, Bo?
I can.
All right. So let me click over. This is our first time trying to get funky here on our doing some tricks here. So let me know if it loses it. You still see my screen?
Got you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to go through little examples. He's talked about price reduction because people think, hey, let's this house, and we're going to use 500,000 as a price point just because sometimes it's easy math. Let's see if they'll take 475 on this home. Well, this seller may not be able to take 475 on this home. They may be needing this down payment to buy something else. So that's not always the best advantage. So work with an agent that kind of knows what they're doing. But let's go in with, let's just call it 123 Main Street. It's $500,000 listing. Taxes, we'll say annually here. This is not really going to play into anything other than a monthly payment. Guys, this will be a whole nother segment. We talk about home insurance, so that will be a topic probably for the next show.
You bet.
And we'll bring in a guest talk about insurance, but it's be sure you're shopping for this. Changes are coming. So let's go in. So you're going to put 10% down on this new home, your $50,000, 30-year term, conventional financing, fixed rate. Let's say today's rate 7%, no points. There's your mortgage insurance, $173. Let's say closing costs, we'll call it $10,000 as closing cost. Let's go to the next slide here, and we're going to go toward they want to offer $475, a $25,000 price break. So what we're going to do is compare this on a monthly basis to show you the difference it makes to do a 2-1 buy down as opposed a price reduction for less money. Keeps more money in everybody's pocket. I'm talking all the way around, seller and buyer. 25,000. So to take the price down to 475, 10% down still, so 47,500. Reduction in down payment. Yeah, they're saving a little bit here, but they're getting a reduced cost. $10,000 seller paid closing costs. We're not going to put any there for now. Leave that at 0.
Right.
But we're going to look at here's the scenarios we're comparing is a $25,000 reduction with a new price of $475 or a 2-1 buy down. As we said, note rate, let's say it starts at 7%. Well, the way this works is for the first 12 months, your payment is at 5% because it's a 2-1 buy down, so it's 2% below market rate. And this is just prepaid escrow. We'll go more in depth in that later as well, the moving parts of this, but just as a high level view. And then then after the 12th payment, so 13 through 24 month payments, your rate would be 6%. It's going to cost the seller a total of $10,489 roughly. Now this is Bo. This is not what I would use if you and I do have something more in depth, but for presentation purposes,
Right.
the easiest thing to show everything. Okay, so
Yep.
So it's going to cost the seller. So we're leaving the price at 500,000. Okay, you don't want to kill the comps for the neighborhood, but now we're going to get the seller to pay 10,000 toward a buy down. Okay. That's the savings between the 5%, 6% rate over those 2 years. That's the savings in interest as opposed to paying 7%. So it's a little savings there. So we go through. So here's everything calculated out. 123 Main Street. Here's the 30-year 7%. Everybody's paying their own stuff. $450 loan amount after the 10% down. $50,000. There's your rate. 7%. These are just, guys, this is for scenario purposes. It's not a quote. I didn't want to throw that in there. It's just for scenario.
I'm going to hold you to this.
Principal and interest is, yeah, no kidding. People do. They say, you said this. Like, well, I didn't. That was a scenario. But anyway, monthly principal and interest to start, $29.94 a month. So let's say that you said, hey, I want